it shouldn't be so rare. That, you know, we live in such segregated neighborhoods anymore these days. And that's really the message of the book. When you write a book, you kind of always hope that it brings people through an experience, you know, because when we've lived in the mind and heart and body and soul of somebody else, which is what you can do in a book, you know, maybe we look at other people a little differently. Maybe when we see somebody having that experience, we kind of feel like we've lived through it a little bit. And so that's always my hope for the books. And I brought along something to close with that's actually not from any of the books. It was a magazine article years ago. But it fits this gathering, and you'll see why, I think. It's a true story, and this is just the way it happened. Happened in the tiny little town of Lometa, Texas, which, if you've never been there, it's about a half hour from no place. It's an hour from a Walmart. Didn't know there were places like that, but they do exist. I have survived in one. This has been quite a few years ago. After 9 o'clock on a Tuesday in Lometa, Texas, there's nothing going on in downtown and not a light on. Our Tuesday night ladies' Bible study had just finished a lesson from the book of Matthew about how having faith as small as a mustard seed would make you able to move mountains. About a dozen ladies were gathered in the fellowship hall, cleaning the potluck dishes while the children played tag around the tables. And all of a sudden, we looked up and realized there was a stranger in our doorway. The children stopped what they were doing, and we stopped what we were doing. And the stranger, standing there with a greasy ball cap in his hands, explained to 12 curious church ladies and 10 wide-eyed children that he and his wife were hungry, and they had run out of gas on our corner. They were trying to make it home to Brownwood, about another hour down the road. They were out of money, and they had been hoping that the car would get there before it ran out of gas. They'd spotted our light on as the car had emptied, and they figured they'd better stop because the next town was 40 miles away. Faced with such a situation, and while being scrutinized by the children, the church ladies had little choice but to extend Christian charity. We invited the man to bring his wife in for a plate of our cold potluck leftovers. And meanwhile, one of the ladies hurried to call the pastor about getting some gas money and some food from the pastor's pantry. The man thanked us, and then he came back with his wife, who looked as if she was probably pregnant. And together they sat at the table in our kitchen and ate cold casseroles as if they hadn't seen food in a week. My son, just 4 years old then, stood completely mystified, watching the guests gorge themselves on our dried-up potluck leftovers. "What's wrong with them?" he whispered. "They're hungry," I whispered back. "How come?" he asked. "They don't have any money for food," I said. "Well, how come?" "I don't know." "How did they know we were having potluck supper tonight?" "I don't know," I whispered. "How come they are eating so much food?" "Shh," I said. When our guests were finished eating, we outfitted them with canned goods, some gas money, and a couple of plates of leftovers. And we stood there near the door and joined hands to pray for the rest of their journey. When the prayer was over, the wife, who had said very little until then, looked at us with tears. "I just want to tell y'all thanks," she said quietly. "I've been praying and praying for an hour. Have faith as a mustard seed and nothing will be impossible. I knew God was going to take us with the gas to where far enough where we'd be safe." The gathering fell silent. No one spoke as our guests opened the door and disappeared into the night. Some of the ladies looked around to see if the verse about the mustard seed was still anywhere on the blackboard. And some just took it on faith that we'd all been part of one of God's little miracles. We gathered our potluck dishes and our children and headed into the darkness to draw our own conclusions. As my son and I drove home along the country road, he was thinking about potluck supper. I like Potluck Supper, he said, yawning sleepily in the seat next to me. I do too, I told him. It's fun to go to Potluck Supper. He was silent for a moment, looking drowsily at the stars outside. It's a good thing. God likes Potluck Supper. He whispered, letting out a big yawn. Or else you wouldn't know where to tell those people to come get food. You're right, I agreed. I think, he yawned again, God likes Potluck Supper because everyone brings something different. The car fell silent. Watching the night pass on the fringes of the headlights, I thought about the vastness of the world and how no two things are made exactly the same, no two people alike. We are God's potluck supper. We are big and small, rich and poor, brave and fearful, bold and shy, talkative and quiet, all sizes, all shapes, each created according to one of God's recipes. Each of us brings something different to the table. Different looks, different containers, different contents, all wonderfully made. You never know who you're going to meet at the table or what is beneath the surface, but it's best not to turn your nose up at anything. You might miss a chance at something wonderful, something unexpected, something new, something miraculous. And isn't that really what Potluck Supper is all about? So, with that in mind, you have a couple more questions that your hostess is going to bring for you to talk about around the table. It's wonderful that the committee did such a good job decorating, and it's wonderful the food that's going to the cafe. And I hope, as various ones of you or your groups have time, you'll stop down at the cafe and have lunch. It's a great experience, and the food's good, I can testify. It's all made with love. So the questions are, tell us about a neighbor or a community member who made a significant contribution to your life in the past, and share a time you were able to be a neighbor to a stranger, because the Bible tells us we're all neighbors. So thank you very much. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the conversation around the table. It was my pleasure and privilege to be here to share with you today.